Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Virtual Island Summit. Thank you so much for joining this session. My name is Ariana Abdul-Noor, and I am the project manager at Island Innovation, based in London, UK. Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy, primarily focusing on islands. Our services include island development strategies, impact program design and coordination, capacity building, events, strategic communications, and governmental affairs. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you are interested in learning more about our work, please reach out to us using the contact information available in the chat. I'm very, very happy to welcome you guys to this session titled The Road to COP29, Island Priorities for Baku. Before we begin, you should all see a poll appear now on your screen. Please let us know your gender, where you're connecting from, and the sector and industry that you belong to. I'll give it a few seconds. I see a lot of people in the chat from all around the world. We have Papua New Guinea, Geneva, Jamaica. Fantastic. We can share the results of the poll later, but fantastic to see so much representation on this session. So without further ado, I would love to introduce what to expect today. So as island communities face the brunt of climate change, the role of young voices in climate negotiations is becoming increasingly crucial. This session will focus on the experiences of worldwide experts, plus 2 emerging leaders from the Caribbean Climate Justice Leadership Academy, who are poised to represent their communities on the global stage. These panelists will share their experiences, aspirations, and insight into UNFCCC COP processes. Okay, we have the results, they're up. So I see we have the largest proportion from Caribbean, which is lovely to see and very sort of fitting with our 2 Caribbean delegates. So 45% from the Caribbean, 30% from Europe, none from the Middle East so far. I know one of our speakers is currently in Iran, but maybe didn't get the time to vote. And we have a lot of people from the private sector, NGO, academia, and also focusing on environmental services, energy, finance, politics, tourism. It's really, really great to see a lot of different backgrounds and industries attending, and yeah, very much look forward to the conversation that we will be having today. I invite you guys to please make use of the chat function to introduce yourself and any comments in the session. Please make sure that you're using the Q&A function for any questions that you may have for the panelists, and we'll do our very, very best to make sure that we can have as many people up on the Q&A session as possible. So I will now hand over to our CEO, James Ellsmore, who will be moderating this session, who will also introduce our wonderful panel today. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much, Ari, for the introduction to this session. Really looking forward to a great discussion discussing the road to COP29. Lost count there. There's been, well, 29 of them. What does this mean for islands? 29 COPs in, what have we seen? What do we expect? What do we hope will come out of those conversations in Azerbaijan? We have a great lineup of speakers representing some different angles. But in order to set the scene, I'm delighted that we have a message from our keynote speaker for this session, Elnur Sultanov, the CEO of COP29, representing the government of Azerbaijan. So I'll ask our team to share some information and to go ahead and share the video presentation for Mr. Sultanov.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, my name is Elnur Sultanov, and I serve as the CEO of COP29 and Deputy Minister of Energy of the Republic of Azerbaijan. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to all the speakers, participants, and organizers who have gathered here online from across the world. Your dedication and commitment make this event truly remarkable and timely. The islands are not merely participants in global climate dialogue. You are on the front lines of the climate crisis. The world must realize that the devastating impacts of climate change are no longer distant possibilities. They are harsh realities. It's our collective responsibility to ensure that your voices are heard, your needs prioritized, and your resilience strengthened. The stakes could not be higher. COP29 in Baku is a crucial milestone in our shared journey to combat climate change. Azerbaijan is committed to climate action and the energy transition. We are already experiencing the negative effects of climate change in my country, facing extreme heat, water scarcity, and falling sea levels in the Caspian, all of which have a direct impact on our lives and livelihoods. We are making significant investments in green transition. Azerbaijan is playing a positive role in following the global stocktake and ensuring that, among other things, we transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner. We have at COP29 two pillars of action. At the heart of this event, the presidency of COP29, is a vision that plans to build on two equally vital pillars: enhancing ambition and enabling action. Enhancing ambition means ensuring that the critical tools, reporting, planning, and commitments are aligned with the goals set out in the global stocktake. We must signal clear intent from all parties, ensuring that no one, especially the most vulnerable, is left behind. Enabling action requires tangible progress on climate finance. We are committed to agreeing on a new climate finance goal, NCQG, and finalizing Article 6 to support the development of high-integrity carbon markets. Progress here will send a strong message that the ambition needed to meet our climate goals is backed by the necessary resources. Small island developing states are on the front lines of climate change. You are among the most vulnerable to its impacts, yet you have contributed the least to global warming. The leadership and innovation from island nations in areas such as renewable energy, sustainable fisheries, and climate resilience are inspiring. Island nations, though small in size, are making significant contributions to global sustainability efforts, and their experiences offer valuable lessons for the entire world. COP29 is committed to amplifying the voices of SIDS, ensuring that their unique challenges and needs are front and center in global climate discussions. This builds on our recent engagements with island leaders. Just 2 weeks ago, COP29 President-designate Mukhtar Babayev addressed the 53rd Pacific Islands Forum in Tonga, highlighting the urgent need to increase adaptation and mitigation finance, with the new climate finance goal prioritizing developing countries, particularly island nations, and the critical importance of finalizing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, allowing countries to cooperate in achieving emission reductions. This is key to strengthening global efforts in mitigation and adaptation. Earlier this year, at the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States in Antigua and Barbuda, we reiterated that COP29 must translate ambition into action for those most vulnerable to climate change. For SIDS and least developed countries, the stakes are existential. Swift action is needed to fully operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund. We are committed to driving momentum on this issue and to fully supporting the Santiago Network, a platform established at COP25 in Madrid for vulnerable developing countries, in providing technical assistance, including the implementation of relevant approaches for addressing loss and damage at the local, national, and regional level to those who need it most. We, the Presidency, are determined to work in solidarity with all of you to drive meaningful outcomes. Collaboration is key to overcoming the challenges we face. A shining example can be seen in the partnerships between island nations and other countries that are focused on developing sustainable energy and climate-resilient infrastructure. We are seeing innovative approaches to harnessing renewable energy, protecting marine ecosystems, and adapting to the impacts of climate change. These efforts are not just about survival, they are about thriving in a changing world. At COP29, we will highlight these success stories, and we will work to replicate and scale up these initiatives globally. The resilience and ingenuity of island states can guide our efforts to build a more sustainable and equitable world. As we approach COP29, we urge the global community, including the private sector, to join us in supporting island nations. These nations are not just victims of climate change, they are leaders in the fight against it. We must ensure that financial resources, technical support, and political will are directed towards such vulnerable nations. We all have a moral duty to avoid overshooting the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature target. But the window of opportunity is closing, and we must focus on the need to invest today to save tomorrow. Our fixed priority is delivering deep, rapid, and sustained emission reductions now to keep temperatures under control and stay below 1.5 while leaving no one behind. COP29 presents a unique opportunity to unite in our commitment to a sustainable future. By working together, we can turn the tide on climate change, ensuring that the most vulnerable among us are supported and that no one is left behind. To conclude, the island states are central to the success of COP29. Their leadership, resilience, and commitment to climate action are exemplary, and it is our duty to support them in every way possible. Let us seize this moment to reaffirm our commitment to the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal and to take the bold collective action needed to achieve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Minister, Deputy Minister of Energy and CEO of COP, Elnur Sultanov, for those words. It's been very interesting to see Azerbaijan's approach as the host of COP, a big undertaking for Azerbaijan, and we're all very much looking forward to seeing what comes out of Baku, and appreciate the highlighting of the needs of SIDS by the presidency, which we'll get to discuss further in this session. Next, I'd like to invite Riyad Medeb, who's the director of the Sustainable Energy Hub at UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, but critically, someone that I met in their previous role as Senior Principal Advisor for Small Island Developing States, which is very important, and so has a lot of experience with SIDS in all different parts of the world. I just wanted to comment, sorry, Riyad, before you go in, I had a couple of messages about the sound. Our tech team checked that out and said it's okay on our side. So there's not much we can do about that. I apologize, but there is an option to enable captions that you should see. If you click show captions, you should be able to see that. But not much else we can do otherwise on our side. So Riyad is an expert on all things SIDS and particularly on sustainable energy, and really appreciate you in the midst of your travels joining us today. So over to you for some opening words, Riyad.
Thank you very much, James. And how can we say no to you? First of all, yes, thank you very much. I love the SIDS. I lived in SIDS for the last 20 years. I worked on small island developing states. But now on my new functions, I'm focusing mostly on energy, but also on energy for the small island developing states. First of all, dear participant and dear friends, it is for me a real pleasure to be here today for this panel discussion on the priorities of the SIDS for the COP29. And when I got the invitation from James, I was really, really excited as we approach the key high-level political event this year. And you know, in a few weeks, we're going to have the Summit of the Future, the COP29, and our collective effort must lead to tangible that looks at country-specific investment that align energy, climate, and development goals in small and developing states. As mentioned by the Deputy Minister President of the COP, it is very important that we follow the vision of the SIDS. Just in May, the adoption of the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Small and Developing States marked a turning point for us, all of us, to rethink the role of sustainable energy, not just in providing electricity, but in turning on a systemic transformation and improving the quality of life of small island developing states. In many SIDS, youth make up nearly a fifth of the population, and in countries like Haiti, is 25% of the people. For these young people, access to renewable energy is not a luxury. It is essential for development. And while access to electricity is higher in small and developing states at 76%, the rate has remained virtually unchanged since 2019. Energy security in small and developing states has long been compromised by heavy reliance on fossil fuel imports. Energy bills reach up 18% of the GDP. And you remember, all of you, during the COVID-19, the situation was really constrained and the fiscal space was extremely narrow and no capacity to pay the bills for electricity. So the whole economy was stopped. And in response, many cities have set very ambitious energy targets in their NDCs, aiming at 100% renewable energy by 2030, and some of them by 2025. And yet, as of 2023, renewables still account for around 20% of cities' electricity consumption. Moreover, as one of the key challenges, with over 40% of cities facing or nearing unsustainable debt level, their capacity to invest in resilience, climate action, and renewable energy is severely limited. And on the road of COP29, we all must therefore ask how we can catalyze the energy transition in cities to build resilience and to unlock economic opportunity by bringing clear impact for all. And through our SIDS offer in UNDP, Rising Up for SIDS, we are supporting SIDS through catalyzing a shift across the entire value chain of the clean energy sector to accelerate action for a just energy transition. First of all, I do think that we cross-cutting all the aspects of development in SIDS is the crucial role of finance for sustainable energy in SIDS to provide opportunities for debt relief. SIDS need an investment of around $10.5 billion is required to meet their 2030 renewable energy target, facing the challenge of financing renewable energy projects without exacerbating its debt burden. Most of the SIDS are middle-income or high-income countries, but with high level of debt. To address this, we must urgently develop a robust energy finance architecture that offers debt relief while removing financial constraints and limiting access to capital. And I'm very happy that this last month, we adopted the multidimensional vulnerability index that takes into account the reality of the SIDS when they are accessing to concessional financing. This includes leveraging innovative finance tools like green bond, blended finance, public-private partnership, and de-risking measures, as well as supporting debt for energy swap and thematic bonds. In SIDS, debt for energy swap could be most effective within a sovereign framework where bilateral partners agree on debt reduction in exchange for government investment in renewable energy. Sovereign thematic bond also present a powerful means of scaling finance for energy transition. For example, in Mauritius, UNDP is facilitating the shift toward e-mobility through innovative finance mechanism, helping overcome financial barriers and supporting the implementation of electrical vehicle policy, regulatory framework, and infrastructure. Second, the triple relationship between digital, data, and AI is very important with renewable energy. It is bi-directional, and sustainable energy is a key driver of digital transformation, while digitalization provides the means for innovation and management across the energy value chain. And in cities where climate-related disasters like mentioned by the Deputy Minister, caused power disruption and 153 billion in losses from 1970 to 2020. 153 billion. This number is very important. It can strengthen energy resilience, security, renewable energy adoption through smart grid and microgrid, especially in remote areas. Digitalization, AI and data analytics play an important role in entire energy value chain by ensuring optimized off-grid solution and optimizing energy planning, such as smart grid, grid optimization, pay-as-you-go system, and peer-to-peer trading. Digital AI managed energy solution and data-driven policymaking can unlock investment opportunities and drive the just energy transition. And this is where the youth can play a real role. And youth are already leveraging this digital solution that transcend geographical barriers, creating synergies across the entire energy cycle, and catalyze the involvement of entrepreneurs in innovative renewable energy solutions. Third, and finally, adopting the whole island approach, interconnecting renewable energy with ocean economies, can reduce reliance in fossil fuel import and support economic diversification. As you remember, the seeds control 90.1% of the EEZ of the world. It is estimated that seeds would save around 3.3 billion annually if all energy production was transitioned to renewable sources, equivalent to around 3.3% of the GDP. 3.3% of the GDP. And UNDP's Blue Economy for Green Island approach amplify low carbon, resource efficient and inclusive growth in cities by integrating blue and green economies while stimulating investment in innovative sectors like marine renewable energy. This can further enhance cities' role as innovation centers. You remember what the Deputy Minister said. They are in the forefront of the climate change, but they are in the forefront of innovation in order to respond to the reality of climate change. Integrating SMEs, MSMEs, and youth in the value chain, supporting inclusive growth and sustainable energy for development across the sea, it is essential. And as the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Seeds outline an ambitious pathway for sustainable development with energy as a key priority, we all must recognize the strong link between energy and development. And the interlinkage presents a unique opportunity to promote effective and meaningful participation of women and youth in the development and implementation of sustainable energy practices. As we look ahead to COP29, in Baku, we must view renewable energy not just as a climate solution, but as essential for future-proofing seeds sustainable development. Together, it is time to reshape the narrative, enabling seeds to proactively define their energy for development path and emerge as leader in sustainable energy innovation. Today, this event organized by GEMS and Island Innovation is a very important way for empowering all of us to decide about the future of the seeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Riyad, for those kind words and that great intervention. Really appreciate your insights and your experience into this sector, and especially as we lead into this critical COP, very important for SIDS. So thank you very much, and safe travels. We appreciate you joining us today for this session. Next, we have two speakers, and actually I'm going to invite you both to come on at the same time. Both have been members of the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy and have amazing projects in their own rights locally. So we have Whitney Melanard and Javon Sands. If I can invite you both to come onto the screen. There we go. Whitney is part of leads the Kalinago Ripple Effect organization, and Javon's a climate change youth ambassador in Bahamas, who is currently in London at the Commonwealth meeting. So has very kindly stepped out to take some time to share some insights with us. And both of you are doing some fantastic work within the climate justice and in general within climate change space. And definitely it's great to have youth voices like yourself participating. So we'd invite you both just to share individually some of your insights and initial presentation. So Whitney, if you want to take it away and go first.
Hi, sure. To all the organizers, participants, the entire audience, especially those listening from Dominica, Mabrika. Ayatina Whitney Melina. I am a proud indigenous youth from the Kalinago people of the Commonwealth of Dominica, a breathtaking island nestled between the two French islands of Guadeloupe and Martinique. And it's also the home of the largest group of indigenous peoples and a symbol of resilience in the face of climate change. My ancestors fiercely protected this land for generations, a legacy I am committed to upholding. As a descendant of these brave protectors, I've always felt a profound connection to nature as it brings me peace, clarity, and purpose. This purpose was solidified approximately 5 years ago when I was just 16. Now allow me to tell you a side of my story that has been drowned by the horror stories of many. 5 years ago, I had a home in my indigenous reservation, a land rich in indigenous arts and crafts and a simple way of living. In less than 9 hours, battered by Category 5 winds, my house was totally destroyed and basic commodities in our communities were absent for years after. With just one hurricane, my indigenous home, which was already facing many socioeconomic vulnerabilities before this climate-related disaster struck, was most trampled on despite our little contribution to the anthropogenic emissions. The government of Dominica, in parallel with regional and international organizations, shouldered the heavy task of rebuilding. Now, despite the tremendous support received post-disaster, many, including myself, have been unable to rebuild our home and livelihoods in the Kalinago territory, and by extension, Dominica. Now, my story reflects the economic and non-economic losses and damages caused by climate disasters. While climate-related disasters are projected to intensify and increase, small island states like my Dominica face a constant threat of another hurricane, which can reverse developmental gains and paralyze our national response capacity. My people also face the threat of loss of livelihoods and food security, human resources, and maybe even key aspects of our tribe. Now, based on my experiences and driven by a passion for tackling social and environmental issues in my community, I founded the Kalinago Ripple Effect Initiative. This initiative champions indigenous perspectives and advocates for policy changes. It all began in my grandmother's yard, along with 3 other young Kalinago people. Back then, and even today, our goal remains the same: to address critical issues like sexual assault, elder abuse, and climate change within our communities. We have partnered on women empowerment projects, tackled climate change initiatives, and advocated for legislation containing child sexual abuse and equal access to digitalized educational platforms. Currently, the Ripple Effect Initiative is transitioning into the youth arm of my registered foundation, Kupano Inc. This new youth arm will continue to prioritize climate justice, social justice, and cultural preservation. Now, my foundation, Kupano Inc., means I am strong in our Kalinago language. This organization is a women, youth, and indigenous-led foundation dedicated to addressing social issues and finding environment and sustainable solutions and advocating for the well-being of vulnerable and marginalized groups. The foundation also aims to be a platform for community-based approaches to natural resource management and the empowerment of the marginalized. But I didn't stop there. My passion and responsibility towards people and community also fueled my application to the CCGLA, the Climate Justice Leadership Academy. Now, those 4 weeks were truly absolutely enriching. And the presentations, the discussions, they were brimming with knowledge and diverse experiences. The sessions on legal and policy frameworks were absolutely invaluable. They allowed me to critically examine Dominica's climate policies, propose changes, and start plans to advocate for improvement. It also deepened my understanding of crucial intersection between climate change and social policy, an area which I am deeply passionate about as I aim to work at the crossroads of climate justice and social justice one day. Moreover, the CCJLA program, it emphasized the importance of having intersectionality and justice at the forefront of climate advocacy. Another highlight for me was learning about the French Caribbean's significant role in global climate advocacy, especially considering Dominica's location between the two French islands. The program also broadened my understanding of regional climate issues and fostered collaboration and knowledge sharing across the entire Caribbean, which I think we all know is vital for addressing regional challenges. Through this course, I have received support from my Indigenous representative in Parliament, the Honorable Kozia Frederick. He too continues to champion for climate action and is the first Indigenous leader to hold such a bold portfolio as the Minister of Environment. I believe this can also be interpreted as the acknowledgement and appreciation for Indigenous people being active torchbearers of climate action. I would absolutely highly recommend this program to any young person passionate about the state of their environment, as participating in this exceptional program has given me the skills and the knowledge to advocate effectively. Now, as I get ready to be at COP29, it will be my first, hopefully not the last. I am excited to meet with other young like-minded individuals and learn from them and to understand climate change from different perspectives. I'm also very proud to represent my country and my people at such a level. Now, I am particularly excited about discussing the incorporation of culture and Indigenous and local knowledge at every decision-making level and promoting a natural positive and nature positive action to help recover and prevent further biodiversity and environmental degradation and loss. I'm also interested in discussions regarding improving disaster response and disaster recovery efforts and climate financing, especially from non-economic losses and damages that affect Indigenous communities, as well as the need to support the response mechanisms for small island states like Dominica. Now, my selection and participation for COP can also be interpreted as the continued recognition of the importance of having Indigenous youth as active participants rather than passive participants in these kind of discussions. So I am extremely grateful and thankful to the CCLJ for this opportunity. My journey to bring Indigenous perspectives to climate change continues, and I am better prepared for this path because of the CCJLA. So let us all continue to collaborate and network for the betterment of our sacred spaces in the world, and let us try to leave this planet better than we found it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Whitney. And you're really a fantastic ambassador for Dominica and for the Caribbean. Looking forward to meeting you in person in Baku. And congratulations on all of the work. And I should have mentioned in the introduction, we had, as part of the CCJLA, 50 young people from across the region take part in the virtual cohort, including every CARICOM member state and also a number of territories in the region. From those 50, we had the incredibly tough decision to select 8 to go to COP. And I really mean incredibly tough decision because there are some amazing people in that group. But I believe that many others are hopefully going to also find their own way to COP. So Whitney was one of the 8 selected as part of the official delegation to COP. But another young person who was part of the CCJLA and has also been doing incredible work, Jervan Sands. So Jervan, maybe you can tell us some more about your own work, things happening in the Bahamas, and what you're doing at the Commonwealth event today.
Thank you, James. So good day to everyone tuning in. I did see in the chat that there are some from the Bahamas, so a special welcome to you. My name is Jervan Sands, and I'm a climate change youth ambassador of the Bahamas, but my journey in climate action work has began farther back. I think that it really began to become a reality for me in terms of my future career path in my first year of my undergraduate experience. And what happened there was I was fortunately and coincidentally placed into a first-year seminar on sustainability. Unfortunately, in that same year, the Bahamas experienced Hurricane Dorian. So this was during 2019. And at the time, I was immediately thrown into action. I remember organizing meetings with fellow Bahamian students on campus with our university president to gain support from the institution for the Bahamas. And that experience catapulted me into this work. And since then, I have been involved with a number of different organizations before coming into my role as climate change youth ambassador. So during my junior year, while studying abroad in London, I actually interned with Ashton Global Climate Change Charity. And during my experience with them, I was able to interact with emerging sustainable organizations and enterprises coming out of the Global South and seeing firsthand how people in the Global South were responding to this issue of climate change and how they were adapting through their innovation. And with that in mind, it informed my decision-making process of getting involved with that work back home. And so as I would return home, I found myself working with government departments, conducting sustainability reports, conducting environmental inspections and being on environmental task force, joining in on town planning committee meetings. And so the role and the interest in climate change and climate action took me into spaces where I was able to be that youth representative for Bahamian youth. And what's important to me being in this space is I am the capacity currently that I'm trying to build for the future. And so I find myself on both sides of the coin where I am working and engaging at home to build capacity among youth for climate action. And at the same time, I am operating as that current capacity for Bahamian youth. And so it's an interesting experience, even more interesting being a researcher and observer at COP27 and now moving into a role of a youth climate negotiator in COP29. And so in the space of 2 years, I've moved into a new role and felt that transition. So I was benefiting from capacity building efforts of others, and now I am on the opposite side, trying my best to encourage and develop that back home. And so the way that I'm doing that with my team of ambassadors is that we are engaging students in the school system and really youth across the children and youth demographics by creating an initiative that is educational in nature primarily. But what the initiative serves to do is to address some challenges that we were able to pinpoint through our assessments and through feedback from our recent Bahamas Youth Climate Conference. And coming out of that experience, we learned that some of the biggest challenges is reaching our youth population across the island. So we are a large archipelago, as it would be such, even though we are a small island nation. We are a big ocean state and our islands are spaced out. And there are students in these different areas that becomes difficult to reach. And so knowledge dissemination is a key problem that we want to address with the education initiative. And with that comes financial constraints and other issues that arise. But what we are doing is working with digital platforms and an already established virtual school, as well as working to try and have a physical presence through school tours throughout the island, delivering curated presentations that focus on a select age bracket or grade level grouping of students to meet them at their level. And at the same time, we are recognizing that the data and understanding what the actual issues are based on data is difficult to achieve when the data is limited. And so taking that into consideration, we've also included into this approach a data collection mechanism through knowledge and assessment and evaluation. And all of this leads into this idea of trying to create and build that capacity necessary for moving into the negotiation space and advocating at a higher level on the international level for what our country's needs are and having those needs be met by the wider COP community. And it's an interesting experience to be on the opposite end. And I had a similar challenge, I would say, when I spent the last year on the opposite end of a classroom teaching. And so it's very interesting to now be working with educators and developing these workshops, these presentations to help build capacity among youth. But we're also taking it further and working with sustainable organizations and enterprises, research entities, in order to help further bridge that gap between youth and the action that they are so interested in pursuing in terms of their climate futures. And so I think there is a growing concern among Bahamian youth to be involved in securing their future. And as an ambassador, my role is to create that connectivity and that continuity so that as I move beyond my role as ambassador, I know that there is a strong grouping of young Bahamians ready to take the reins and be a part of the new capacity for being on the global stage, advocating and doing work also at home. And so that's kind of a sum up of my work thus to this point. And I'm really looking forward to being at the COP. And I'm grateful to the CCJLA because without it, I would not have the appreciation for regional solidarity that I do now. And I would not have the connection to individuals from the Caribbean who have been a part of the program that will be there at the COP. And we can have that regional solidarity with us as we're making our positions and being a part of the UNFCCC COP process. So I'm extremely grateful to the CCJLA, and the program also has just been so lighthearted and so engaging that I find myself excited to tune into every session each week. And we're not meeting this week, but we are engaging in the Virtual Island Summit, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about when we meet next. And so thank you, and that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Jovan, for that overview. And as I mentioned, there are 50 young people who participated in the program this year. I can see many of them in the audience. So Jovan and Whitney were invited to give a sample, but for the others who are here as part of the CCJLA audience, welcome you just to say a hello in the chat and share a bit about your projects. I'll also mention that in addition to Whitney, we have a cohort going to COP, which includes Najee Nunes from Jamaica, Genesis Whitlock from Antigua and Barbuda, Joshua Badu from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Nigel Maduro from Aruba, Noel Young from Bermuda, Chelsea Anthony from Belize, and Tyrell Gittins from Trinidad and Tobago, all of whom will be part of that COP cohort. And bringing that critical youth activism voice, which, as we have discussed, is extremely important. There's some more information in the chat about that program if you would like to know more. Now I'll invite our last speaker to bring a different angle into the COP process, but an absolutely critical one. Laverne McFarlane is a senior economist at the CARICOM Development Fund. And of course, we know that when it comes to climate finance, this is an absolutely critical piece to the puzzle. And much of the conversation now at the COP has moved from mitigation, especially when it comes to SIDS, to financing adaptation. So Laverne, looking forward to knowing some more about the CARICOM Development Fund and the work that you do. Over to you. And thanks for being here with us.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on where in the world you are. I just want to share my screen for a bit to get into the presentation that I've prepared. Thank you very much to Island Innovation for this wonderful opportunity. Let me just confirm if you're seeing my screen.
Yes, we are. You can go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah. So essentially, we were at COP last year, and we basically did a soft launch of a fund that we developed specifically for climate adaptation, mitigation, and broadly economic development. So at the CARICOM Development Fund, we are a regional institution. We're based in Barbados. I'm Jamaican. Big up my Jamaican people in the house. I saw quite a number of you out there. The intent of the CARICOM Development Fund is to provide technical and financial assistance to the disadvantaged. And disadvantage comes in various ways. We know that small island developing states, we are on the front line of this climate change. We've seen where the disasters have taken over up to 350% of a country's GDP. Even more recently, we've had Hurricane Beryl 2 months ago, and that although it was a fairly large enough Category 4, it still did significant damages in the region. Our key mandate speaks to improving efficiency and competitiveness to attract integration in the CARICOM region and to improve on innovation, financial innovation in particular for climate action. We just recently got accredited by the GCF, so we are now a full-fledged institution specific towards climate finance and climate action. That being said, we basically provide interventions to 12 countries in the Caribbean region, the 6 independent OECS countries, Barbados, Bahamas, sorry, not the Bahamas, but we know that the Bahamas is a CARICOM member country. We have Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Guyana. We have our thematic priorities here focused on human capacity development, which is critical to implementing the various policies and procedures that are in place. Environmental resilience and climate action, crucial to what we'll be speaking about in terms of climate finance and improving the climate finance architecture within SIDS, particularly within the Caribbean region. Infrastructure, community empowerment, also critical, which 2 of the youth ambassadors spoke about, how involved they are in their various communities, as well as transformation of the agricultural sector, a critical element of the UN SDG goals. That being said, we have recognized that there are significant problems where we're concerned as it relates to the climate action within the region. We know that governments within the region, because of the significant debt burden that they bear, they typically have limited fiscal space as well as significant social challenges that basically prevents them from focusing as much as they want to on developing and creating resilience towards climate action. We have done our research and we found that the resilience financing gap within the region is north of $20 billion US. Now, that's way beyond the GDP of all of our member states combined, much less individually. The regional governments, of course, do not have the fiscal space to address all these issues in terms of building resilience for climate action and ensuring economic sustainability. The sustainability gap, the debt burdens within the region, given the limited capacities of the member countries, when we compare that to other emerging market economies, such as the LATAM region, for example, we see the Caribbean being way above in terms of the debt burden that currently maintains. How do we then address these matters? We recognize that coming out of COP28, the launch of the Loss and Damage Fund was a critical solution coming out of that. However, we recognize that there's still ways to go because the Loss and Damage Fund, although there's been some commitment to it, we don't know, for example, the full amount that will be pledged, how much it will be capitalized at, and more importantly, how much of that will go towards the SIDS and the Caribbean in particular. So therefore, we need to take action ourselves. We need to develop a market that creates the demand for and supply of not just private sector finance, but the unorthodox or the unusual sources of finance we typically look to multilateral development banks. We typically look to donor institutions. But what about our philanthropists? What about our foundations? What about the institutions, the private sector in particular? We need to crowd in those resources because within the Caribbean region alone, there is an excess of 50 billion US dollars in liquidity in some of these institutions combined. Increased flows of concessional financing for governments, given the excessive debt burden that currently exists, is also a critical element that is needed to scale up public sector efforts within the climate action space. And broadly, access to climate action funds is critical. And coming towards COP29, it would be important to see what will happen in terms of the loss and damage fund. What will now, how will it be implemented? How will the resources be dispersed? We have therefore developed a Caribbean Community Resilience Fund. What that does, it basically blends financing from the CDF, for example, which is a multilateral regional institution. And this is, of course, necessary to mobilize private capital at a much needed scale in order to catalyze financing to the various projects. Our projects that we're looking at are significant to scale as we are focusing on the SMEs and particularly youth entrepreneurship and as it relates to female-led businesses. So these elements are critical because we know the SMEs are the engine of growth within any small island developing state. So private capital, of course, we recognize that if it were to go towards climate action alone without any assistance in terms of blending that finance, faces various constraints in terms of limiting its deployment into climate-related investments, because the private sector would want to be secured and convinced and be comfortable that the risk that they're taking on can be returned accordingly. So we've done this, we've structured this, this fund. We're now in the capital fundraise stage. We're about to close in end of next month. Our fund managers at the current moment, we are proud to say that Cygnus Capital out of Jamaica are very instrumental in ensuring the success of this. It's a $100 million fund initially. We could potentially upscale to $135 million. We are looking to service the entire 12 member countries of the CARICOM Development Fund. We're even going beyond the borders to incorporate, for example, the Bahamas and potentially the Dominican Republic because of the vulnerability of those countries as well. That being said, the CDF will be providing first loss capital to this fund of $15 million US. Critical to this, a portion of this will be basically ring-fenced towards capacity building, because we recognize that technical assistance towards building the capacity of the projects in particular for the SMEs is crucial to the success of the projects. That being said, all of this is basically background from mandate given from heads of government, where we need to develop growth and resilient investing, and we think this fund will do exactly that. However, critical to this is the focus on the private sector. So coming to COP29, we want to be able to see something geared towards the public sector, wherein we can have a parallel fund that will focus on public sector financing at a concessional rate. The focus will be on housing. We're looking at affordable housing, sustainable building materials, energy, of course, right across the renewable energy efficiency chain, And of course, we have all those lines there for the entire CARICOM region. In this, we also want to be seeing the successful implementation of the ABAS that the first speaker in this prestigious panel spoke about, where when we look at projects that are not commercially viable, the public sector, of course, will have to take up those roles towards implementing the success for climate action and climate change. So that being said, I hope that I was able to pique your interest in terms of what the CDF is doing to change the financial architecture for climate financing to address climate change matters within the Caribbean region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laverne, for that overview and a critical piece, climate finance. We are at time, but I'm hoping that our speakers who are still here, Whitney, Jovan, and Laverne, are able to stay for another 10 minutes or so just to answer questions. If you have to leave, I do understand, but if you're able to stay for a few minutes and would like to turn on your cameras and join me for a little discussion, that will be fantastic. I'll invite the three of you to join me on screen. Really appreciate those different views as we ramp up into the COP season, let's say. Jovan, Laverne, Whitney, anyone there? There we go. So I guess to go back to Whitney first. I really appreciated your intervention, and I'm curious to know from your perspective, and particularly as a representative of Indigenous people who often don't have that voice at the COP discussion, what would you like to see personally happen this year? And from people who are in your community and in Dominica, what have you heard as something that they see that really needs to happen on the international forum? But it can also just be you personally, what you would really like to see happen this year at this summit.
Hi, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things I would really like to see is more attention given to the non-economic losses and damages that we face as Indigenous peoples. So, for example, as Kalinago and as Indigenous, we see that our language is eroding. So my group, we have a river cleanup and rebuilding initiative going on, and our rivers are drying up. In the last hurricane, we had our lauma, which is what we use to make the baskets, and we had the trees that they used to carve out the boats. These were damaged. And these are things that are integral and important to our culture, our traditions. And I'm seeing that slowly these things are being eroded because we don't have the resources anymore because of climate change. And I think it's very important to pay attention to not just the economic losses and damages, but the non-economic losses and damages as well. And I think other young Indigenous peoples in the Kalinago territory would feel the same way with regard to that. So I think that is something very important. And with going to COP, and something that I really would want to continue, is to empower other young people, not just by saying you can do it and that your voice is important, but to teach them and to provide them with the links, the resources, programs like the CCLJ to sign up, to get involved, so that they are also equipped with the knowledge and the expertise to speak up for themselves and to advocate effectively. So coming from COP, I hope to really have that, the knowledge and the ability to go home and to educate other young Indigenous people and to really provide them with the resources to do so.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and very interesting points. And I wanted to flag actually for anyone interested in this topic that one of your colleagues from the Academy will be moderating a session on Friday around island Indigenous cultures and languages. So Nigel Maduro from Aruba. We'll be talking to a number of Indigenous experts to discuss this exact topic. So we hope that you'll join for that discussion, and will be a really interesting session there, but definitely an important link to make. Jovan, from your perspective, what would you like to see come out of the COP this year, or what do you expect to see?
I think to follow up on what Whitney was just talking about, it's certainly important to consider all sides of loss and damage. And even in the economic side, there is a hierarchy in terms of the focus. And so for the Bahamas, we are experiencing significant loss and damage from climate change impact currently. And the way that often manifests is with a loss of our natural resources that are our natural defense mechanisms. And so, for instance, our mangroves were severely damaged during Hurricane Dorian. And with that, our marine ecosystems, our livelihoods are being affected. And so you have this connection between both sides of the economic and non-economic that is being somewhat ignored in the discussions. And so coming out of COP29, I'd like to see a kind of dedicated and well-structured approach to funding loss and damage, and going beyond the funding, but just acknowledging and considering that, you know, it's a wider issue than just the economic side of things. But, you know, speaking of funding and finance, in addition to loss and damage, you know, loss and damage is focused on the things that we are no longer able to adapt to. But if we continue to limit or constrain adaptation finance, then that list of things that we can no longer adapt to is only going to grow. And so definitely balancing also just the entire financial landscape. And so really the NCQG is an important part of this year's COP. And, you know, this is being called the Climate Finance COP. And so that's one of the biggest issues that I'd like to see responded to well enough that coming out of the COP, we have a clear vision of what the next 6 years leading up to 2030 will look like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jovan. Laverne, or sorry, Dr. McFarlane, I should say. You gave us a very interesting overview of the CARICOM Development Fund. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, do we see, for small island developing states in the Caribbean region, are there enough funds available for the adaptation that is necessary to climate change? And do you expect that from the COP, for example, more funds will be coming available? I mean, including this fund that you represent, but more generally, what does that landscape look like for adaptation for the small island states?
Yeah, thanks for that, James. An interesting discussion from the two other panelists so far. What we see, everything tends to be relative, of course. So we can always say, yes, there's more than enough funds out there, but is it geared towards climate action? No. So to answer your question pointedly, the answer is no. But let me back it up with a couple of points. We recognize that there is slowly been a shift towards climate finance, which is important. But is it happening fast enough? And is it going towards where it is needed most? So those two questions, the answer to that, no. Coming out of COP, in addition to what Jervin just said, I really would like to see the loss and damage fund, the commitments increasing, one, and a significant amount being going towards to the SIDS, and especially the Caribbean. We recognize that there is over $20 billion worth of resilience building that's needed for the Caribbean region. Member states, the governments, they cannot afford to fill the gap there. So what do we need to do? We also want to be able to negotiate as one Caribbean bloc. It's always been countries going to represent themselves individually. And I think there is strength in numbers. So coming out of, or coming up in COP29, and I'm hoping that there are some representatives in the participation here, that it would be good for us to go as one Caribbean region to negotiate as a bloc, and therefore the funds will come in within a fund, and then we are able to disperse and distribute accordingly based on, of course, needs and how we see the member states being vulnerable. And then the final thing that I want to see come out of COP is we've started the process in changing the financial architecture, but we're not growing fast enough. There are various innovation in the financial space that is needed for us to get to that space in terms of addressing the different issues that currently exist. So that being said, we are hoping that we can really attract the resources that are needed to address climate action in SIDS, the Caribbean in particular. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the three of you have offered so much great insight. I could really talk to you all for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, we are at time now, but thank you all and to the other panelists so much for those insights, really powerful stuff. And for anyone interested in this topic as well, there'll be another session taking place later on today. I think specifically on the topic of climate justice, where the chairman of the Barbuda Local Council, Devon Warner, will be discussing specifically Barbuda's experience when it comes to climate justice. So I would encourage you to check out the agenda and look at that. But with that, I'll say thank you to the panelists, and I will hand back over to Ari to wrap up.
Hi. For some reason I can't put my video on, but I think you can hear me, right?
We can hear you, yes.
Great. So thank you, James, Riyadh, Whitney, Jeveron, and Levan for your fantastic insights. We just wanted to let you guys know, for those of you who may have missed it, we announced some very, very exciting news during our opening session. Island Innovation is partnering with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to host the Global Sustainable Island Summit next year. After this year's experience in Prince Edward Island, now the Caribbean takes the spotlight. The summit will be held from May 27th to the 29th, 2025, and we'll be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainable energy. Please note that all attendees of the Virtual Island Summit can get an additional discount on early bird tickets using the coupon VIF24. And please check the chat and our website for more details. Our next session will be navigating the future of responsible tourism for islands, which will be coming up in less than 1 hour, which explores the unique challenges that islands face in an evolving tourism landscape. We hope to see many of you there, and thank you so much once again for joining the session. There are. See you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.